Tonight on Chronicle, move over, Harry. This magical Potter was the real deal. The hocus pocus of Richard Potter, America's first stage magician.
When Richard Potter was performing, he didn't have all of the technology that we have today. He would often perform in an inn that was lit by candlelight, so he had much darker spaces to work in and much more opportunity for sneaky things.
Imagine, ladies and gentlemen, if you will, the amazing magnetic eggs, or the famous human salamander. Almost 200 years ago, they were a part of an act that brought black magic to the audiences all over the world.
And behind the wand, a man from Andover, New Hampshire. Sean McDonald performed a little hocus pocus to see if he could conjure up the first famous Potter in magic, Wingardium Leviosa. Tom, you're losing your dog.
It's true then, what they're saying on the train. Harry Potter has come to Hogwarts. Harry Potter.
For millions of us, it's this youngster who brought magic back into our lives.
There, I see it. The one with the broken wing.
But long before, and I mean really long before, the days of Harry Potter, there was another famous Potter in the world of magic, and he hailed from Andover, New Hampshire. In the early 1800s, Richard Potter was known throughout the country as a master of black magic. His stunts included the human salamander who could touch his tongue with a hot iron, or a master ventriloquist who could make his voice sound like almost anything. It amazed the 19th century audiences.
People were starved for entertainment. A performer would come to town once a year or twice a year of his type. So they didn't have the opportunity for other forms of entertainment, so they didn't have to have a huge repertoire of material. This is a piece that was commonly seen around that era. The equipment was much more difficult to get.
Andrew Pinard is a local magician who gave us some history of Richard Potter and showed off some of his old tricks that in some form still exist today.
Magic has not changed much over the years, mainly because people haven't changed very much over the years. When Richard Potter was performing, he didn't have all of the technology that we have today. He would often perform in an inn that was lit by candlelight, so he had much darker spaces to work in and much more opportunity for sneaky things.
Richard Potter was born in Massachusetts, the son of a British nobleman and an American slave woman. In fact, he was dubbed one of the first black illusionists in America. Back in the 1800s, magicians like Potter traveled to small towns and set up their magic show just about anywhere they could. Admission, about 25 cents.
If you hold it like this, it becomes a wine glass.
Of course, back then, illusions were rather simple, like this impromptu origami, or sleight of hand that may not dazzle today. But remember, these audiences had never seen anything like this.
It's the type of magic that often happens inside someone's mind first and then is confirmed by the props or the objects in front of them. They tried to appeal to people's sense of what happens when you put your hand on a hot stove. I mean, people at that time knew about that. You don't pick up coals with your hands, you use the coal shovel. But when he could apparently do this, it was interpreted by audiences as a magical experience.
Potter was so good at his craft, he got rich from it, once touted to earn almost $5,000 for a 20-day engagement. The money helped him build an estate in Andover where he lived with his wife. No pun intended, but Potter was known to entertain here a lot.
When he wasn't traveling on the road performing, he made Potter Place his home.
Today, this is what's left of the Potter homestead. This part of the neighborhood would later become known as Potter Place in the magician's honor. When work called, the master magician wouldn't see home for weeks.
He would go to Portland, Maine and Boston often. And of course, there were no trains, and so travel was slow. And so when he left home, he was gone for a month or 2 months or 3 months at a time. And we understand that his wife accompanied him during part of his career, and then later his son. And prior to that, he had a a young apprentice who was actually from Andover.
Of course, small towns in the 1800s weren't always easy for someone of black heritage. Ever the showman, Potter would work his magic.
He was denied entrance, basically. He wasn't allowed to eat at one particular inn. So when they sat down to dinner to a roast pig, he threw his voice from the next room and making the pig squeal every time the knife cut into it, and as a way of getting back at these people. And eventually they realized that it was the performer doing this, and they invited him into dinner. So it actually it opened doors for him in a lot of ways.
He became legend with his ventriloquism and illusions. In 1835, at the age of 52, Richard Potter passed away. His gravesite is still there today alongside his wife, just feet from where his home once stood. Today, it's snowmobiles and not trains that run by the old Potter Place train stop. Once a bustling connection to Boston and Montreal, it serves as home to the Historical Society now, just part of the Richard Potter legacy that is still alive today. Whether it's in a name or in an illusion that can fool the audience 200 years later.
What we learn from these earlier performers is the impact that you can have from a very simple but direct effect. You and I both know that there's no possible way to get a ring on from the middle of the rope. But if you blow, you can actually make it appear to go on the rope. I think that there is a certain movement afoot of people who are willing to slow things down and look for a richer, deeper experience that the performers that Potter represents gave 200 years ago.